It's called The Greatest Generation, not because they wanted the title or asked for it, but because they earned it. They are the generation that knows the true meaning of sacrifice and service to country and to the greater good. This generation is now passing away, with many of its stories yet untold. This film tells the story of one of those great men who answered the call to serve. In the spring of 2013, I had the privilege of sitting down with my grandfather, Ernie Clute, to record his story.
I asked the draft board if they would defer me until I graduated from high school. I only had 3 months to go. And I graduated the 25th of May, and I was sworn in the Navy the 4th of June. Didn't take long. It was probably not really well, it was my choice, but you were in line, and they took one for the Army and they took one for the Navy, and it just happenstance to be that way. But I was glad to have the opportunity to go in the Navy. And I'd worked in the pharmacy in high school, and so I had a little experience that way, and went through boot camp, 6 weeks, and then went to corps school, hospital corps school, and only 10 days, and they found out I had apprentice pharmacist license. So they pulled me out and put me right to work in a ward, and it was a cellulitis ward where had all kinds of infections, you know. And so I got a little experience there, and then the doctor said one day, would you like to watch a surgery? I said I would, but it never happened. And I got called out, and I thought it was going to go to a fleet hospital. And he said, well, I can arrange for you to stay here if you want. And I said, no, sir, I'd like to have a new experience. So what happened, I was actually put in right across the gully in the dispensary, where they have new recruits coming in, and they have problems, they bring them to the dispensary. And so I worked there for about a year, and that was pretty good duty. I had 3 nights off, you know, and you could go. And then Liberty, we got orders to, I started out as a Fleet Hospital 116, and then we gathered this group together. We went out to California and waited there in Oakland, California, and, for further orders. Then we formed the military government unit number 51. And our job, this was something kind of new, our job was to go in and take care of the civilians, set up a hospital unit and dispensaries. So we didn't know where we were going exactly. They issued us foul weather gear, so we figured, well, we're probably going to Aleutian Islands. Well, they don't tell you where you're going, you know. And so finally, we went out in the Pacific, and I'd never been on the ocean before, so this was a new experience for me, and I never realized how much water there is in the oceans, that you can travel for days and days and days without seeing any land, you know. And but I liked the board ship. There was about 3,000 of us on board that troop ship, and we stopped on Hawaii, but we didn't get off. We weren't allowed to get off. Then we went to the Marshall Islands, and then over to the Philippines, and we landed in Leyte, and there was still combat going on then. It was actually the last month of the combat, and we gathered all of our supplies together and then loaded on a ship. We were there about a month, 2 months, and then on a Liberty ship, and we went out into the South China Sea, and we still didn't know where we were going, but we knew we were going to invasion someplace. The typhoon hit us, and that was rough. That's the time I really got seasick. Typhoon hit, a lot of rocking and rolling, and the galley was up on the top deck. And you sit there, and of course they have a little ridge on the top of the table, so the dishes don't slide off. They might slide a little bit, but to come to that ridge, they stop. And you could look out one side, and all you see would be water down that way. And when it goes down the other way, well, all you see is sky, you know. So you're rolling back and forth, and up and down at the same time.
Wow.
When we did finally get to Okinawa and made the invasion, we got on a landing craft, you know. You never know what the bottom is going to be like. You get off of those, they let their front end down, and you walk off and into the water, and sometimes it's over your head and sometimes it's waist high, you know. Some of the guys lost their rifles. But we got on shore and went inland. We followed the infantry right in, and there was a lot of ships were being bombed. Japanese Zeros were coming in doing suicide dives. They never expected to come back. They would dive right into the ship and explode with their bombs and so on that they had. We got in and land a ways and set up camp for the night. And of course there was shooting going on all around. We didn't know which bush was a Japanese enemy or what, but a lot of the guys were shooting. They used up all their ammunition. There was one fellow named Cheeseman and I that were paired off, and we found this chicken in the little village in the bush that's there. And I said, let's get that chicken and kill it and have it for supper. Be better than K rations. Well, it was an old hen, and it cooked and it cooked, and finally got dark, and one of the warrant officers cussed and swore at us to put that fire out. Well, we took some baskets. We found some baskets there, and we put that out over so we couldn't see flame. But that was a tough old bird, I tell you. Well, they pulled me and another fellow back out of the unit to guard the supplies on the beach. And the Navy was still taking quite a shellacking right there. I remember one fellow, airplane was coming, a fighter pilot was coming back from a run, and he evidently had been shot because he was late in getting back, and by that time the flags were in the air that you could shoot at anything. And the 20s were shooting at him on the shore and on the ships, and we run for the foxhole because he was coming right at us. I thought for sure he was going to land right in our foxhole. Well, the piece fell off probably 100 yards away, and he went on and belly slammed landing, and he got out alive, and he said, "Did I hurt anybody?" Wow. I thought that was quite a strange remark to make, you know, after everybody had been shooting at him. He was trying to show his star and winging, you know, and coming in. But, well, we went back, finally went back and into this little village of Koza and set up our hospital. And we used, there's 2 houses in that village that had tile roof. The rest of them are all thatched. And so we set up our surgery there in this mayor's house and the doctor's house, I guess it was the 2 tile roof houses. The Koza was right between Yontan and Kadena. That was 2 airfields. There's only one of them there now, I guess. The other one was closed, I guess. But this artillery unit behind us, it was shelling Naha. Naha was shelling us, so we were in between sometimes. Okay. They fell down a little close. We had to run for the foxhole. We could tell it by the sound whether it was our shells or theirs. I know a lot of the Japanese would try to sneak through at night. They'd go through the villages and even through our area, you know, and try to get to the northern part and get into the caves and live up there. We did all kinds of surgery, just whatever came. Of course, the bombs were going off, and every time one would go off close by, well, we take a sheet and put it up over the patient because soot would be rattling down on the bed, you know. And so we didn't have any plasma or any blood, so we lost a few patients. I remember there was a little girl about 14 years old, and she had shrapnel in her leg, in the femoral artery, and that was bound up real tight. And just as soon as we took the bandage off, it hemorrhaged, and she died. I know I counted to 10. I dropped ether. And that was just that day. Well, that was one of the experiences to start out with. We had one fellow named Rana Barger that was, he didn't like to work in surgery. He'd rather do the cooking. So we traded places with him, let him do all the cooking. And it was, by that time we had C rations, which was cans of food, and a little better than K rations. Then a couple of weeks later, there was a building not far away that it was a storehouse, really, I believe, but they set up the galley there, and that's where we went and had our meals. We had, in about a month, they had a Quonset hut built for us, and we did surgery in that. I was in the surgical team, and we were doing about 18 operations a day for 2 weeks straight there, all kinds. We used the native girls for nurses' aides, and one of the girls seemed to understand English. she never spoke it. You didn't hear her speak it. But she would take orders and do what she was told to do. And finally, she was laughing one day when some of the guys were telling a joke. And I said, "You know English. You can speak English, I bet. Tell me about it." She says, "Well, my father and I came over from Hawaii, and he wanted to visit the grave sites of his ancestors. And he died while he was there. She was, maybe 14, 15 or something like that. So she had to live with relatives there. And I said, "Well, do you have any relatives back home?" And she says, "Yeah, I have a sister and a couple brothers." And I said, "Well, do you suppose they would take care of you if you got back to the Hawaii?" Because she was born and raised, and she could speak, read, and write English just as good as you and I. And she said, "I think so." Well, through the Red Cross, I wrote to her, got a hold of them, and got their address. And she wrote, and I wrote to them and explained the situation. And they wrote back and said yes, that they would be responsible for her. The time come that she would be able to leave the island. So she got letters back and forth from them, and they'd send them to me, and I'd give them to her, And she didn't know how to express her appreciation. She'd come up and she'd just beat me right on the chest, And well, Jim Fenwick, he was a corpsman. He got friendly with her, and I said, "Jim, you've been over here too long." And he says, "No," he says, "I've gone with a lot of girls down in the States." He said, "But she's a nice girl." And she was. And her name was Mabel Miyoko Miyasato. And we became friends, and he took his discharge right there on the island and stayed there and worked in the civil service. And then they had a baby boy, and they come back to Hawaii, and then back to the States finally, and he went to college and seminary, and he became a Episcopalian minister. Wow. So through this time we corresponded, and when we went on a canoe trip, when Bill was about 12 years old, Pat 14, and we went up to Minnesota on a canoe trip, and, well, he lived in Minnesota, so I called him and I told him we were going to be up in that area. He says, "Well, coming or going, you stop and spend a couple days." So he stopped coming back and spent a couple of days with him. Dr. Ranieri was a surgeon, and he had studied surgery on the hand over in France and Germany, Italy, for 5 years, and did a lot of skin grafting. And he says if you can save the thumb and any one of your fingers, you got gripping power. When you think about it, you do, And had one little boy that his hand was pretty well shot up, and we took and cut his stomach here, 2 slits, and then rolled it together, and then sewed that underneath together. And then after that kind of healed together, he cut that one end of it, a tube was there, and put his arm in a cast so he couldn't move it, and attached that skin to his hand there, and reconstructed his hand that way.
Wow.
He was amazing. The things that he could do. Yeah, we did all kinds of operations, even childbirth. I know when I was on the island, we had a typhoon on Okinawa, in the little village of Kosa. And they had bamboo around each little house, just kind of a shrubbery break. But those bamboo, they'd bend clear over to the ground. They'd come back up, and they'd bend down to the ground. When that wind changed around the other direction, they'd bend clear over the other way. Just like a fishing pole, very flexible,
Wow.
But everything got all wet and blew down the tents. And we had to set the tents. Had 16 by 16 wall tents that we lived in. And we had a couple rows of them. And then there was up another level, up a little bank. There was a couple rows of them up there. When the typhoon struck, we moved we had one tile roof there. We moved all the babies in that, and all the patients we could. We jammed into the more permanent buildings because a lot of the thatch roofs would blow away. Of course, they could be replaced, but their walls were very thin. It was a warm climate, and they could move the wall, slide it, so it could open one side of the house up, be open. We'd have a little firebox that they built a little fire and they kind of warm their hands on. And they didn't have a smokestack or anything. They had an open fire in the house in places.
Wow.
The smoke would just go up into the rafters. I remember one time they had a girl that they brought over from Hienza. She was 16, 17 years old, but she was teaching school over there. But she developed what they thought was appendicitis. And doctor examined her and took blood tests, and he wasn't sure that it was. So we waited a day or two and finally decided to do an exploratory and opened her up, and there was a ruptured follicle on the ovary. And symptoms were pretty much the same for appendicitis. While we were there, we did take the appendix out. But while she was there, her folks had come over with her, and the typhoon struck. And I remember she was in that doctor's house, tile. Her parents were there. And about 7 days after the operation, I removed the stitches, and then we took her back to her village, Hienza. It was a small island just off Okinawa. Okay. Low tide, you could walk from one to the other. I mean, it would be waist-high water, maybe, but when it was high tide, then you used a duck that goes on land or water. And we got close to her island and taking her back, and she said, "Home gone." I said, "What do you mean?" The storm blown it away, just blown out.
Oh, wow.
So she had to go and live with a relative. Her parents too. Yeah. I went over there a couple times, and they had they put on a play, and they served us some fish and rice cookies and tea, and just had a little picnic, the older women did the cooking for the patients, and there was one little boy. We had cut his leg off, amputate his leg, and he had just a stump here. And I remember him going out into the sugarcane field, crutches. He'd sit down there and he'd take the stalk of sugarcane and he'd chew on that, because that was sweet. But his mother was one of the cooks, and because Jim Denson and I changed the dressing on him quite a lot, she appreciated, and they did appreciate what we did for them. Mm-hmm. And she made a little doll, a cloth doll. I don't know whether I got it or not. I used to have upstairs. And she brought over a pan of temporas. They're like corn fritters. They're golden brown and light and fluffy. You know, they're pretty good. But just to kind of show her appreciation, you know. Bob Vickery, yeah, he and I run around together before we went in the service, you know. And he went in the Army and I went in the Navy. And we wrote back and forth, and he wrote me one day and he said, "It's so muddy." He says, "We can't even use the vehicles. We have to use horses to haul the ammunition." I thought, man, he can't be anywhere else but right where I'm at. So there was an MP unit right behind us, and I went over and I asked him if this infantry outfit was on the island. And he said, yeah, they're right down the front lines. So next Saturday I took my helmet and rifle and hitchhiked down to Naha and found him. He just got back off a night patrol. It was hot in the tent, I remember. He was just stripped right down.
That's pretty wild.
So we visited a while, and then he came up and visited me, my unit. Yeah, and there were several other guys from Andover that were on that island too. There's Albert Carr. We used to, about the same age. We used to play together. And he was in the Seabees. And he drove a semi, lowboy, to haul equipment, heavy equipment on. And there was a couple other guys too that I met from Andover. And I thought that was odd in a way, that from a little town in Ohio, clear over in Okinawa on the other side of the world, get together. And then after Japan surrendered, this was in August, the commander put me in charge of ship service. And that was a pretty good job. We bought all the supplies for the men, and also I took care of the mail. I was a mailman. Okay. We had one tent that we called our USO tent. And every Saturday night, while they'd bring in all the drinks that they could find and or make, they made some out of mulberries. They had a lot of these earthen jars, put so many cans, plasma cans of water, so much sugar, and a cake of yeast, and so many cans of mulberries, and then cover it all up and let that ferment. 2 or 3 weeks later, while they tap it, you know. kind of a mixed drink. Whatever else they could buy from the Air Force. The Gene Galbraith was one of the guys that was in my unit, in my tent, in fact. And I remember one night he got a pretty good sized cup. He drank about 3 of them, and it was pretty high potent evidently, because I could see that he was under the influence. I said, we better get out of this tent. The smoke was so thick you could cut it with a knife. In one corner of the tent, one of the cooks had a little bar there, and he had cheese and meat and bread, and made big thick sandwiches, you know. And the guys were coming and going. I said, we better get out of here. We had a Lister bag right down the alleyway between our tents. Wasn't much more wider than that opening of that doorway there. Had a Lister bag where you get water to drink, you know.
Okay.
It's a great big canvas bag with spigots on the bottom of it. You ever seen it?
I've never seen one, no.
Well, our water wasn't very good there. So the guys were allowed 3 cans of beer a day, I think. And I never drank any beer, but I sold quite a lot of Coca-Cola. I had a case of that underneath my bed, and so that's what I drank. I didn't drink much water. I don't today. I remember Galbraith and I got out of there, climbed up the bank, and it was muddy, rainy, and slipped trying to climb up that grassy bank, muddy. Our area was up above it. It was probably 6, 8 feet from one level to the other. You know. And he got sick during the nights. He just lay down on his bunk and then he got sick. And, oh boy. I remember before I left that we were sitting on the floor in the mayor's house. There was an Okinawan doctor, the mayor, and some of the other people around. And it took a big handkerchief, and they wrote on it, you know, in each corner, wherever they were sitting, they wrote on it, wrote their name. And, there was a song that they sang. It was Sadaba Okinawa yo Marakuda Made wa Shima Shiba Wakane no Namada Kakushi. That was have a good, happy trip home. Live in Okinawa.
That's cool.
I was there until I was on the island about a year, and come home, and I had to work my way home. I got enough points so I could come home. Come home on an LST, Guam, picked up 300 Marines, and then we dumped half of them off it, and we talked the other half of Kwajalein. They were new Marines, new green. I mean, they hadn't been in combat, but it was over by that time. And I was the only medical representative on board ship. So I was worried about the records, taking care of them. Anything else I didn't worry about. Well, the guy said that I replaced, he said, well, that'd be the least of your worries. He says, just take my files and make copies of them, update them. There were about 5 copies I had to send in different commands. And he was right. It was the least of my worries. Captain said, when we got to San Francisco, he says, don't you want to stay on? He says, we'll go down and go through the Panama Canal and up to Charleston to disembark there. And I said, no, sir, if it's all the same to you, I just soon get off here. I've had about enough.